Did the IDF destroy a monument to Turkish aid workers in Gaza? Yes and no. Like everything in Israel, it's complicated. Now, before we get started, if you are in NATO or an allied military and you want to use this video as a training tool, the graphics and imagery are available on my Substack for members. If you send me an email, I'll also get you an ad-free copy of this video that you can use for training. And speaking of ads, I spent $500 on satellite footage in this video, and that isn't cheap. So give me 60 seconds to talk about ground news. So there's been this TikTok video going around of a family at Thanksgiving that has a Democrat table. And that really bothers me because it's not something that you should be proud of. I'm old enough to remember when Democratic Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill was friends with Republican President Ronald Reagan. Arguing with each other is no way to spend Thanksgiving or Christmas. So you know what this family needs? A Vantage Plan subscription to Ground News. So go to ground.news/Ryan McBeth and subscribe through my link to get 40% off a Vantage Plan for this month only. That's the same plan that I have. I actually paid for a Ground News Vantage account. They did not give this to me for free. It is a tool that I use. For example, did you know that New York Mayor Eric Adams went to Washington to ask for help with the migrant crisis in his city? Well, if you lean left, you might not have heard that story. Or did you know that Iran recently hacked a water system of a Pennsylvania town? Well, if you lean right, you may have missed that story. And Ground News gives you both the factuality rating and the ownership of the publication, so you can determine how accurate a source is and who might be behind misinforming you. So go to ground.news/Ryan McBeth and subscribe through my link to get 40% off a Vantage Plan for this month only. It will allow you to understand the opposing side, and maybe we can all have Christmas dinner at the same table this year. Now let's talk about this MV Mavi Mamara memorial. On November 16th, pictures started circulating on Twitter of the destroyed Mavi Mamara Martyrs Monument in Gaza. The monument is located near this fishing port to the east of Gaza city center. Now, about the Mamara Martyrs, this is one of those situations where one man's hero is another man's terrorist. The MV Mavi Mamara was a Turkish-built passenger ferry and part of a flotilla of multiple ships that left Turkey on May 30th of 2010 with the intention of landing aid workers and relief supplies in Gaza. Incidentally, the MV in MV Mavi Mamara means motor vessel. It's an international way to categorize ships, like SS means steamship and PS means paddle steamer. The ships were part of what was dubbed the Freedom Flotilla, which consisted of vessels that were flagged in multiple countries and consisted of aid workers and activists from the Free Gaza movement and associated organizations. This Free Gaza movement was a group that was founded in 2006 by California peace activists Greta Berlin, Mary Hughes Thompson, and Para LaRuti. And this group was formed with the expressed goal of breaking Israel's sea blockade of Gaza. Now, Israel has maintained a blockade of Gaza since Hamas took power in 2007. The last official list I could find of blockaded or prohibited items that Israel does not let into Gaza, contained things like arms and ammunition, which, okay, I'll give you that one. But the list also contained items that were dual use, such as lasers or titanium alloys, because those things could be used to make weapons. But the list also prevented items like concrete, gravel, iron, and steel cables from being shipped into Gaza. If you want to see the complete list, I have both the list of prohibited and dual-use items available on my Substack for free at ryanmcbeth.substack.com. Now, anytime someone starts an activist organization, there's always a chance that someone's going to come along who's a little bit more extreme. For example, in America, one of the oldest environmental organizations is the Sierra Club. This was founded in 1892 as an environmental preservation organization. But let's say you want to be a little more extreme than write letters to your congressman or file lawsuits to stop pipelines. Well, then you could join something like Earth First. Earth First was founded in 1980 as a more radical environmental organization, and their claim to fame was tree spiking. Tree spiking is a method of discouraging logging by driving metal poles into trees, with the idea that when a logger comes along with his chainsaw, the chainsaw will hit the metal spike and it will break the chain. That broken chain could theoretically whip around and injure or even cause the death of the logger. And in the case of the Gaza flotilla, the tree spiker was IHH. IHH are the Turkish language initials of Humanitarian Relief Foundation, a Turkish non-governmental organization. They were started in the mid-1990s to provide relief to Bosnian Muslims during wars in the former Yugoslavia. And while the basic goal of IHH was humanitarian in nature, there was a contingent that was willing to do violence. And as the flotilla was forming and gathering relief supplies, some members of IHH expressed a willingness to become a shaheed, or a martyr.
When I went first convoy, I wanted to be a shaheed. I wasn't that lucky.
You know, when someone tells you who they are, you should probably believe them. So the flotilla sets off, and around this location in the Mediterranean Sea, the flotilla was intercepted by the Israelis in international waters. Note, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea allows countries to declare a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. Everything beyond that territorial sea is the high seas and available for navigation to ships and planes of all nations without restriction. Now, that being said, countries don't normally wait until an enemy vessel or aircraft is within 12 nautical miles of the coastline to intercept. The United States intercepts Russian bombers flying toward Alaska every few months or so, and they perform this intercept in international waters. Incidentally, the last time this happened was August 13th and 14th of 2023. And usually during the intercept, everybody has a good time. The Russians get to test our radar and defenses. The U.S. gets to practice an active alert scramble. Everybody gets some training value out of the intercept. The Russians turn around, we wave to each other, and everybody goes home with a story. So, captains on ships know the deal when the Coast Guard or the Navy approaches. In this intercept, Israel hailed the vessels and told them to go to the port of Ashdod, where they would go through inspection and Israeli passport control. You want to deliver aid? Cool. You got to do it by Israel's rules.
Mavi Mamara, you are approaching an area of hostilities, which is under a naval blockade. The Israeli government supports delivery of humanitarian supplies to the civilian population in the Gaza Strip and invites you to enter the Ashdod port, after which you can return to your home ports aboard the vessels on which you arrived.
To which the ships replied,
"Yeah, shut the up. Go back to Auschwitz."
okay, so we're doing this. The Israelis waited until 4:30 in the morning before attempting to board. Now, the boarding of the Mavi Mamara might be a video in itself. It's really that complex. But here's what happened in a nutshell. When the Israelis attempted to board with small boats, they were met with water hoses, sticks, pipes, and chains. So the boats pulled away and a helicopter insertion was attempted. When ropes were dropped from the helicopter, some genius in the IHH thought it would be a good idea to tie that fast rope to the deck of the ship. Now, I can tell you this. If a helicopter crashes onto the deck of a ship, it isn't going to work out well for the helicopter or for the ship. Like, I get you want to be a shaheed, but did you ask everybody on the boat if they shared that same sentiment? Because when the helicopter comes down in your head, it's sure as heck not going to ask. But let's keep going here. The Israelis dropped another rope, and the commandos started boarding. The commandos were immediately attacked by improvised weapons. One commando was captured, another was thrown over the side to the lower deck. At some point, the Israeli commandos started shooting both lethal and less lethal rounds. Some IHH activists fought back, either with weapons they brought with them or weapons they had captured from the commandos. The Israelis eventually took the ship at a cost of 10 wounded commandos. 9 activists lost their lives, all of whom were IHH. One later died of his injuries, for a total of 10. The Israelis brought the ships to the port of Ashdod anyway, where they cataloged makeshift weapons and found prohibited items, including concrete and metal rods. Also, many of the medicines on the ship that were destined as humanitarian aid were expired or were about to expire. So this was all just a huge waste of money and lives and basically a publicity stunt that got a bunch of people killed. In July of 2010, a monument was erected to the fallen IHH activists in Gaza. Now let's take a look at this monument. Luckily, someone took a panorama here on Google Maps, so you can kind of get the scale. We can see this monument, it kind of overlooks the sea, and there's this mosque behind here with its minarets. Now, the height of the minarets dwarf the height of the monument, but let's try to estimate the height of the monument. It's going to be important. I found this picture online from the Irish in Gaza WordPress site. Now, this picture has a person in it, so we might be able to use this for scale. This person is sitting, but using kinesiology data, we can estimate that a person's thighs are roughly 23% their total height. Now, the average height of a man is 173 centimeters. So if we multiply 173 times 0.77, we get 133 centimeters. So that person sitting is around 133 centimeters tall. Now we can kind of use this to estimate. If we draw a box around the man, we can keep stacking boxes until we get to about 10 and a half boxes. So 133 times 10.5 is 1,396.5 centimeters, or about 14 meters tall. Call it 14.5 because of the pedestal. Now, there's going to be some parallax error, but we're just estimating here. So that monument is about as tall as a city bus is long. Now, here's why this is important. When using artillery, such as mortars, you can perform a technique called shift from a known point. This is where you sight in on a tall object, such as a water tower or a terrain feature, and then all of your subsequent calculations move the fall of the mortar rounds based off of that terrain feature. So if you have a water tower and you make all of the calculations you need to hit that water tower, and then you see the enemy 100 meters to the left of that water tower, you can say to the mortar crew, hey, shift left 100 meters. So if the monument could have been used as a reference point for mortar fire, I can understand why it might have been destroyed. Now, if you look at this picture, it looks like the right minaret of the Al Hassan Mosque may have been destroyed as well, because again, they're tall and they could be used as target reference points. But from the angle of this picture, I can't tell if the second minaret on the left was destroyed. It doesn't look like it was. And there's nothing else around that mosque that's shaped like that minaret. So let's see if we can figure out anything from space. I went and bought some satellite footage from Skywatch. This cost me $500. This is why I do commercials and ask people to give me $5 on Substack. I need 100 people to sign up to my Substack just to pay for these images. And by the way, these images are free on my Substack for paid members. So I have a satellite picture from November 8th where you can see that the minarets, both minarets, the left one and the right one, and the monument are still standing. So if Israel went in and started demolishing monuments and minarets because they could be used as target reference points, yeah, I get that. There's a term called military necessity, which permits the destruction of civilian infrastructure if it is necessary to accomplish a legitimate military purpose. In other words, you're not supposed to run around destroying stuff for the lulz. There has to be a military reason for destroying something. And destroying a minaret intentionally, well, sad, might have military necessity. But if the left minaret on the Al Hassan Mosque is still standing, what does that mean? So I looked at satellite footage from November 30th. And yeah, the monument isn't just destroyed, it's surrounded by either tire or caterpillar tracks. And I think that the leftmost minaret is still standing. The leftmost minaret could still be used as shift from a known point and call in mortar fire. So if Israel was destroying tall objects because they could be used to direct artillery fire, why wasn't the leftmost minaret destroyed? The only conclusion I can come to is that Israel wasn't destroying tall objects to prevent shift from a known point. That rightmost minaret was destroyed accidentally during the fighting. So was the Mamara Martyrs Monument destroyed during the fighting as well? I mean, look at all this dirt and the way the dirt fell. This wasn't an errant shell. This was a bulldozer or some kind of earth mover. This was intentional. And based on satellite footage, all of these tracks around the monument indicate vehicles. You know, the IDF's mission statement, they have a term called purity of arms. This basically acts as a code of ethics. One of the components of that is the following phrase: the soldier will not use their weapon or power to harm uninvolved civilians and prisoners, and will do everything in their power to prevent harm to their lives, bodies, dignity, and property. So it's that last word, property, that kind of gets me. And you can argue that it was a monument to 10 jerks who just wanted to die as martyrs by attempting to harm Israelis. Now, don't get me wrong. The Allies destroyed symbols of the Axis powers during World War II. And the U.S. pulled down a statue of Saddam Hussein, although, to be fair, the Iraqi people were attacking with sledgehammers and we just gave them a power assist. So what are the rules about destroying monuments or historical objects during wartime? Well, like I said, there has to be a military necessity. The Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the Event of Armed Conflict in May of 1954 set some ground rules for cultural property, and Israel is a signatory of that treaty. Article 4 of that treaty prohibits any form of theft, pillage, misappropriation of, and acts of vandalism directed against cultural property. Now, cultural property is defined as movable or immovable property of great importance to the cultural heritage of every people, such as monuments, architecture, art, history, whether religious or secular. I mean, when it comes to the Mavi Mamara monument, we're not talking about something that was 5,000 years old here. Now, from what I understand, Israel has destroyed some other monuments. It recently destroyed a monument to Yasser Arafat. It also destroyed the Jenin horse, which was built in 2003 from auto parts of cars that were destroyed during a previous Israeli incursion. I mean, I'm not really getting the military necessity of the horse here. Now, don't get me wrong, these are symbols of resistance, and maybe Israel was applying a very creative interpretation of its own laws. And in order to explain that, I have to talk about Baruch Goldstein. Goldstein was a Brooklyn-born physician and Israeli resident who walked into a makeshift mosque and gunned down 29 Muslims who were at prayer before he was beaten to death by the worshippers who survived the attack. Naturally, Israel as a whole was horrified at this. But there was a small population of Israelis who considered those 29 dead Muslims to be a good start. And they turned Baruch Goldstein's grave into a memorial and a shrine. Now, apparently the Knesset outlawed monuments to terrorists in 1998 with the prohibition on the establishment of monuments in the memory of perpetrators of terrorist attacks law, and Baruch Goldstein certainly fits the definition of a terrorist, and the shrine on Baruch Goldstein's grave was destroyed by the Israeli government. So, if you look at the destruction of these monuments from the perspective of a terrorist monument ban, it makes absolute legal sense to destroy these monuments. They are just implementing laws within their sphere of influence. And if you consider Yasser Arafat a terrorist, and the guy was involved in planning terrorist attacks, yeah, I can see why you'd knock down his monument. The Jenin horse, I mean, that was kind of cool looking, and I think it had artistic value, but not my circus, not my monkeys. I can't control what Israel does or doesn't do. Now, the U.S. doesn't consider the IHH to be a terrorist organization, but Israel does. I mean, the IHH videotaped themselves saying this.
ويقول في تصريحاتهم نحن نخرج الأسطول العسكري والجنود يدخل إلى السفينة. لو دخلوا إلى سفينتنا ونحن نطردهم إلى البحر بإذن الله.
If it carries weapons like a terrorist and fights like a terrorist and talks like a terrorist, it's probably not a duck. So why even make this video? I mean, there's so much going on in the world that I'm sure most people won't find it important to talk about bulldozing a monument. Well, the smartphone has changed the nature of warfare. Someone can capture an image and present that image out of context. I call this DIP, or deceptive imagery persuasion. And it would be trivial to take a picture of the destruction of a monument and claim that it was being done out of spite or out of vengeance, whether or not it was done from a legal framework. And also note that if you are a leader of soldiers, and if you let your soldiers perform acts of spite or vengeance, congratulations, you just set a new standard. And then it just gets a little bit easier to commit more acts of vengeance the next time. And easier and easier. And that's a road Lieutenant William Calley went down, and I don't know if you want to follow that road. There is a price to pay for being the good guys. And part of that price is doing the hard thing and not acting like vandals, not giving in to your emotions. So if you're a leader in the military, teach your soldiers about destruction and military necessity, as well as what is and isn't an item of cultural property. Because one thoughtless act caught on camera can be misinterpreted around the world. Hey, if you want to support the channel, you can buy one of my t-shirts from Bunker Branding. Today I'm wearing my Live, Laugh, Launch t-shirt for Patriot Missile. You can also join my Substack for $5 and get access to content that I can't show you on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Oh man, I'm so bored! Christ on crutches with a permanent profile. That's because you have the wrong toys! You need a Ryan Macbeth in action figure from the Knife Hand Company. That's right, Ryan Macbeth in action figures go everywhere! Put them on your desk, your Crocs, your keychain! You can even ask Ryan advice.
Ryan, why does Daddy ignore me when I'm over his house for the weekend?
Because your new mommy is way hotter than your old mommy! Trading cards! You get a free trading card in every box! Now that's Ryan-rific! So come on down to the Knife Hand Company and get your in-action figure today! Alcoholism, cigarettes, and non-service connected hearing loss sold separately.